Welcome to another episode of NBA Weekly. I am your host, Pee Wee the Plug, Big Stacks Porzingis. We're going to pause the introduction. We got breaking news. As we guessed, yesterday's video discussing Dennis Schroeder going to the Lakers. We talked about today, Monday at noon, having a bunch of trades come in. Noon happened, and not a lot of trades start rolling in. And we were all looking at our watches like, what's the hold up? We thought we were going to get 15 trades as soon as noon hit. But we do have breaking news. The Phoenix Suns acquire veteran point guard Chris Paul from the Oklahoma City Thunder for a big package. Now, the entire details is OKC has traded Chris Paul and Abdul Nader to the Phoenix Suns in return for Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre, Ty Jerome, Jalen LeCue, and a 2022 first round pick that is protected 1 through 12. It also goes, the protections go into 2023, which is protected 1 through 10, 1 through 8 in 2024, and the protection lifts off in 2025. So as long as this draft pick is between those picks that we just mentioned in all those years, if it has to wait until 2025, the protection is uplifted. So essentially, the Thunder get another first round pick. Just like we discussed in yesterday's video when they traded Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers, we talked about them picking up yet another first-round pick. But that was for this year's draft. So now they have another pick for the future. So they're stockpiling all of these picks. And in return, they give up Chris Paul, who was a guy that we didn't even think was going to last a season last year for them, and ended up getting them into the playoffs and getting them some experience. Now, I think the key thing to talk about is I think that this is a win-win for both situations. When you talk about the return for Oklahoma City, before we get into Phoenix, we know the picks. The picks are their main focus. Sam Presti has been stockpiling those picks for quite a while now, and they just add another one to the board. But from a player personnel, I think they also did a good job and what they got back. Now, Ricky Rubio, I'm not sure what they'll do with Ricky Rubio. He has a couple years left on that deal. He is a veteran point guard as well, like Chris Paul. Obviously not as good as Chris Paul, but Ricky Rubio isn't bad in any way, shape, or form. But with the direction that the Thunder are heading, it's safe to say we still are unsure about how they'll handle that. Are they going to flip him immediately? Are they just going to let him come through and play, with them and play with the young guys? Do they want Shea to start taking the reins of being the point guard? It's a lot of questions there. But when you look around at the other things that they picked up, Kelly Oubre, I think Kelly Oubre fits perfectly next to a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and a Darius Bazley. In my opinion, I think he fits that culture. He's a young wing, very versatile, in two-way spot-up shooting. His scoring has improved over the last few years, especially while he was with Phoenix. And we know the defensive versatility that he can bring on the floor as well. Then you talk about Ty Jerome, you know what I mean? Not a player that's young in age, but he's young in NBA experience, a bigger guard, coming from a nice college situation in Virginia, and didn't get too much playing time in Phoenix, but a guy that showed some promise that Oklahoma City now has. And then what I think is a diamond in the rough type player for Oklahoma City is Jalen LeCue. Those are the type of guys that Oklahoma City likes. They like the Jalen LeCue guys that they can put into their quote-unquote farm system and allow them to develop behind the scenes and turn into something. You know what I mean? We've seen them take on those projects throughout the course of the years and turn them into something, whether it's whether it's a Shea, whether it is Darius Bazley. The whole idea of Russell Westbrook before he became who he is now was they're drafting a guy who's going to be a project that they kind of develop and molded into what we have today. And there's other names, you know what I mean? That's just what they do. I mean, you look at Lou Dort, he's that same type of player where you just draft a guy or you pick a guy up and you put him in a situation where he gets to develop. And over time, you start seeing some of that development over the years and the progression, and there's some potential there. So I like everything that Oklahoma City is doing. And then in a couple days, we'll have draft night, which will have them adding two more guys like that to their roster with the 25th pick and the 28th pick that they're getting from the Los Angeles Lakers. And they're going to have an interesting young core. The good thing about Oklahoma City too is that they still might not be done yet, right? They still have Steven Adams, who has kind of been the long tenured Thunder as of now. I mean, Russell is gone. Roberson is a free agent, so I think that title belongs to Steven Adams, and they could still flip him. There's some teams out there like Boston, depending on what the market is for them to get a big. If it kind of dies down, Steven Adams would be a guy that I could see them potentially having interest in. And they also have a boatload of picks that they can't use all of them. So if they fail to move up in the draft with all of those picks, I could see them maybe picking up the phone and hitting up an OKC to potentially flip Steven Adams and or Rubio, for some additional picks. But when I look at the core, when I look at the young roster of OKC, I kind of like the youth. There's a youth movement that we got going on. Like I mentioned, it's led by Shea, obviously. You have Lou Dortz. Y'all know I love Darius Baisley. Diallo is another guy that's a part of that. Terrence Ferguson still is there. So I think they have a strong young youth movement highlighted by a guy like Shea, who's taking his game to extreme levels. I think Darius Baisley has extreme potential. I mean, very, 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 very capable of being one of the top power forwards in years to come. And then we saw what Lou Dort could do defensively, and I think Jalen LeCue, any Phoenix Suns fan would tell you that Jalen LeCue has some extreme potential in him. Super athletic, young guard. And then when you talk about the future draft picks that they have, plus Diallo and the other guys that they have, there are some things there. So I love the direction that they're in. They got a first-time rookie head coach who's dealt with coaching in the summer league and things like that, so he's used to dealing with young guys. So I'm interested to see the direction they continue to go during this offseason and the draft and whatnot. But the main part of this, the Phoenix Suns, the Valley Boys, this is big for them, in my opinion, because this is the first time that you're pairing Devin Booker up with somebody in that backcourt who has a resume like Chris Paul. I think, over the years, they've had decent guys in the backcourt with Devin Booker, but they haven't had anybody like Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul is an elite in his game. His resume is elite, but then also his leadership and his veteran presence and just the mental aspect of the game. I think Chris Paul is elite in all facets of that. When you talk about controlling a game, how to win games, execution. Those are the things that young teams like Phoenix lack. And that's why they're always like, there's potential for them to be a playoff team, but they're always like last year, a couple games away from being a playoff team. And you bring in a guy like Chris Paul who can turn your season from being, like Chris Paul, when we talk about the Suns, the Suns had the most fourth quarter blown leads, I believe. Shout out to Kenny. I think he said that in the podcast. Chris Paul, at a point, I don't know if he finished the season, but he led the league in fourth quarter points or fourth quarter scoring at one point. So you take a team who had these blown leads, and then you add a guy that's a veteran savvy point guard like Chris Paul, who led the league in fourth quarter scoring, and you put them together, and now the Suns win 4 or 5 more games and are now a playoff team. So I look at the Suns on paper and I love it. You talk about Devin Booker, and who he is as a player coming off his All-Star year. We know how good he is. Chris Paul, we know off the season he just came all NBA, older but still getting the job done. I think you pair him with a guy like Devin Booker, so you don't have to put that much workload on Chris Paul that he had in OKC. And then you bring in DeAndre Ayton, who missed 20 to 25 games last season because of his incident. You put those guys together, and we talk about the young wings that they have, like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They still have Dario Saric, and most importantly, the most important thing of this whole trade is that Phoenix didn't give up that 10th overall pick. So they're able to bring in Chris Paul. They gave up a first-round pick, but that's all the way in 2022 and could lead all the way into 2025. So, and you have the 10th pick to replace or add something that you don't that you're lacking. So I think the Suns are in one of the best situations they've been in since they've had Devin Booker a part of this organization. And you're coming off a season in which they thrived. They were the Cinderella story of the NBA. They had a hella guys stepping up. When you talk about Javon Carter, Cam Johnson, Cam Payne stepped up. So they have something there that's brewing into something that's respectable. Then you go and you add one of the most respected players in the NBA to that core, and I think it just sky's the limit for them. Now, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to execute that 10th pick. I think that 10th pick could turn them into something from like, okay, to something like, whoa, the Suns are doing something big. And as I think right now, the way that the draft can go in so many different directions, it's hard to say who will be there at 10 or what they could possibly get. But I would love to see them get somebody that can do something in that front court, because I think the wing position, they've kind of got that wing position solidified. There's never too many wings, of course, but I would love to see them try to get somebody who's versatile enough to play that 4. If not, Cam Johnson slides down and plays the 4. Mikal Bridges is your 3. And you try to maybe go get a Tyrese Maxey to be your 6th man off the bench. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. Then they also have the situations in trying to bring back guys like Aaron Baines or whatnot, even Javon. So I'm very interested to see how they're going to go in the future. But I will say that on paper, at full strength, at everybody's healthy, the Phoenix Suns are a team that I definitely look at and say they're a playoff team. I'm expecting Devin Booker to come out and have another monstrous season. Building on top of his all-star performance season that we seen last year. I'm expecting Chris Paul to have an even better year than he had in the Thunder, just because the workload won't be as heavy as it was in OKC, so he can kind of preserve himself for playoffs. You know what I mean? I don't think Chris Paul is going to have to play as much as he did during the regular season and put so much stress on his body. I think when you have a Devin Booker and an Aiden that you can defer to throughout the course of the season, but still being that strong head, steady point guard like Chris Paul, you're still going to win games. Just get the team through the regular season, secure yourselves a playoff spot, be that veteran, be that voice, be that leader in the locker room, on the floor, helping execute, helping win games. And then once it comes down to the playoff time, now we can get that full throttle Chris Paul. But I think having Devin Booker, an all-star guard, an elite top 5 shooting guard in the league, to lean on throughout the course of the season. You have this up-and-coming big man that you can also lean on during stretches of the game or stretches of the season. And you have other young guys, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, whoever they get at 10. They'll have guys that can take some of that load off CP3 so he can relax, get some rest, and not put too much on his body to maybe get hurt or whatever. And I think that's just a recipe for success when you talk about the Phoenix Suns acquiring Chris Paul. The question is, how good are they going to be? I think that's yet to be seen, because the West is so jam-packed. You already have the Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, the Mavericks. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Who am I forgetting? The Mavericks. The Rockets, James Harden and his situation, which will be an NBA Weekly topic. Trust me. That kind of takes the Rockets out of the mix, but the Warriors, that's what I was forgetting. So you have the Lakers, Warriors, Clippers, Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Jazz. That's 6 teams right there. The Suns would be a 7th team that could potentially compete for something. The Grizzlies are a team. The Portland Trail Blazers. So it's going to be competitive out west. As good as the Suns are, they can still be in 7th seed type team out west. So they're definitely going to have to still keep focused. Can't get too excited about the Chris Paul acquisition. Still got to hit on that 10th pick, in my opinion. I would even pick up the phone and see if there's some moves that they can make to try to get somebody else that's solidified. I know the money probably isn't too much there anymore because you're absorbing Chris Paul's contract. But if there's any type of wiggle room for them to improve with a player that's already proven and ready, I wouldn't blame them for going that direction. Keeping that 10th pick is big, whether they're using it or using it as trade bait. But all in all, I think this is a win-win for each situation. I think the Thunder thrive because, again, this is a guy that they brought in from Houston that we didn't even think would finish the season for them. All of the things that Chris Paul was able to bring to the table for OKC And now, on top of that, you trade him for the return that they got: Kelly Oubre, Jalen LeCue, Ty Jerome, the first round pick to add to their collection of first round picks for a guy who you was basically kind of like you know what I mean? And then you talk about the Suns, for the Suns to be able to get him, give up a bunch of guys that were solid for them. But Kelly Oubre, they're fine giving up Kelly Oubre because you have Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, who shows you that you can have faith in them. You're fine giving up Jalen LeCue because you're not planning for the future anymore. You're trying to win right now. You're fine giving up Ty Jerome because you have guys that can replace him, like a Javon Carter, who, you know what I mean? Those are guys who are still higher on the depth chart than them anyway. So you're still keeping those key guys, and you're bringing in this all-time great point guard who just came off one of his best seasons ever, and you're adding him to a group that he can defer to throughout the course of a season, reserve himself for that stretch, whether it's during the regular season, the middle of the regular season, at the end of the regular season, whatever, to make that playoff push, and then ultimately give you a chance to compete against whoever you face up against in the playoffs. So I think it's one of those rare cases where you look at it and you can see that both teams benefited from it, and that's one of the best trades that can happen. But I'm your host, Pee Wee the Plug, Big Stacks Porzingis, 1/4 through the wire, #1 Knicks fan in the world, aka Mr. Know-It-All. This is a wrap for today's episode of NBA Weekly. Like I said in yesterday's episode, please, please, please be prepared and be on the lookout for more of these throughout the week. We're about to have a lot of trades, a lot of information, and a lot of news coming to you during this week in the NBA. Peace.